All right, so let's talk about the Trump rally in Washington yesterday. A couple 100,000 patriots going up to support President Trump and getting an honest and fair recount, re-audit, or audit, I should say, of the election and making a stand. You know, much needed. So, of course, Antifa, BLM had a pretty good presence there. We had a correspondent on the ground who filled me in. I couldn't go. She said that the Proud Boys had a great presence all day long, pretty much kept away the Antifa thugs. However, as soon as people started dispersing and got into smaller groups, making their way to their cars or their hotels, of course, Antifa takes advantage of small groups and women and children, starts harassing them, beating them up, stealing their flags, taunting them, throwing, liquids, water bottles, whatever, lighting off fireworks at them. Just totally unnecessary and should not happen anywhere in this country, especially in our nation's capital. We have an expectation of safety in this country, and if we don't have that, we don't have anything. If we can't walk the streets safely, we can't work on the issues that hamper our country from progressing forward. So I'm glad the Proud Boys were there. I know that they've been vilified in the media as a big white supremacist organization, and they're just not. That's that's a dog whistle for the left to validate their feelings that Trump supporters are just Nazis and white supremacists. So Antifa gets away with beating up, harassing Trump supporters, specifically women and children. What kind of organization targets women and children? Obviously, they're not confident in their abilities to have a true fight, so they target vulnerable people, elderly. So the Proud Boys gather back together at night when the sun went down, and they marched in a group of 400 or 500. They marched the streets of Washington looking for Antifa. And of course, Antifa goes back into hiding when there's a true threat. So what happened with the police in Washington? How are they not prepared for conflict in the street? They knew Antifa was going to be there to cause trouble with the Trump supporters. How can the Washington police force not be prepared for that? It's certainly not the first time they've seen it. Not going to be the last. It's just a huge Democrat cesspool up there. And they allow Antifa and BLM to get away with pretty much whatever they want. And as soon as the Proud Boys show up, it's a big problem. Of course, the media won't cover it honestly, so you gotta search Twitter for some true videos of what was really happening. I highly recommend following Jack Posobiec of One American News on Twitter. He was on the ground last night as well. Has some great footage. The Proud Boys is a natural reaction to the violence of BLM and Antifa. These terrorists are not going to be allowed to roam our streets without consequence. And if the police aren't going to do anything about it, the National Guard is not going to be called in to quell violence. Organic militia groups are going to have to pick up the slack, and that's what we see happening. I hate to see what it's going to look like if and when Trump wins re-election. I think it's going to be ugly. Hopefully, Trump won't have to play politics anymore, and he can just call in troops, federal troops, use the Insurrection Act, and just have the troops in the street. So these Antifa get the point that they're not going to do this in this country. They've done it in several other countries with some level of success, but we do things differently here in America. And BLM, they've basically been duped by Antifa into thinking that Antifa supports their cause. Antifa is going to support any anarchic, violent cause, anything to overthrow the government of the United States, Democrat or Republican, they don't care. they get on board with the Democrats because the Democrats give them a platform and give them a voice. BLM, or Black Lives Matter, is an idea. It's great. Of course Black Lives Matter. Everybody's life matters. But when it resorts to violence and it takes on the tactics of Antifa, it has to be condemned. You know, and the black community should hold the leadership of BLM accountable for signing on with the tactics of Antifa. You're not going to get anything done through violence. And Martin Luther King had so much success because he used the parameters of our laws and government to get initiatives and ideas into the mainstream. Doing it through violence is just going to be met with violence. And I hope we don't see more of it, but I anticipate that happening. So we'll see what happens. We'll follow up with a video later today or tomorrow with some more of the aftermath of the Trump rally in Washington. It was great to see patriots out there, you know, much like the Tea Party rallies and protests that were had a few years back. They left the place cleaner than they found it. They didn't cause trouble. They didn't burn anything down. Only when Antifa and the extremist arm of BLM comes through does stuff start getting looted and burned and rioting starts. Unacceptable in this country. The police forces around the nation are prepared and can deal with this, but the politicians need to allow them to do what they're capable of doing. And if not, these citizen militias are only going to get more popular, more prevalent, and there's going to be more violence in the street. Nobody should want that. Nobody should be calling for it. But nobody should be surprised when it happens either, when the politicians don't allow our police forces to do what they're capable and trained to do. So this is a call to all these Democrat politicians who think it's okay to allow Antifa and BLM to roam the streets and harass vulnerable people. It's not okay. It's never going to be okay. Y'all have a good day.